You're listening to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine. And now here's your host, Rish and Big Krawiec.
Yo, yo, welcome to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine.
Wow. Volume 1, number 4, page 61.
I am Rish Outfield, Esquire.
And I am Big Krawiec, Jr.
Cool. Oh, yeah. R080T.
Yeah.
And now it's Announcer Man.
Oh, and Announcer Man.
Not this week, Announcer Man. Back in the closet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Today's episode is All the Rage by David Walton.
David Walton lives near Philadelphia with his wife, Karen, and 5 children, whose average age is 4. His first novel, Terminal Mind, came out from Meadowhawk Press last year. Many of his stories have appeared in magazines and anthologies, including this one, which first appeared in the Phobos Books anthology called, appropriately, All the Rage this year. You can find out more about his fiction at davidwaltonfiction.com or terminalmind.com. And there will be links in the show notes. Today's story is read by Eleiece Krawiec, and today's music is from On Classical, and there will be links to those in the show notes as well.
All the Rage this year by David Walton. They were fashionable people, were Ray and Diane. One might even suppose they were architects of the modern style, from the delicate way the curves and arches of their home clung to the upper rim of Philadelphia crater. But the truth was, Ray had never designed or built anything in his life. And Diane? Well, she dabbled in paints a bit, but she knew she would never be an artist, not in the true sense. As she gazed out from her balcony over the concave city, from the mansions on the rim down to the lake at the bottom where the dregs of the city collected, Diane told herself that she didn't mind. To sponsor, to appreciate genius, to collect, encourage, promote, these things were enough. And when one of their protégés triumphed, like that hologramist in 26, well, then Ray and Diane triumphed too.
The Elliots,
People would say to their friends,
have an eye for greatness. They discovered Strabowski.
Diane switched her eyes to a higher magnification and scanned the hill below her. Ah, there he was, climbing up the ridge, wearing that green suit that looked so fine with his crimson skin. He carried something white on his shoulder. A sculpture, perhaps? Maybe he had discovered the next Rodin, the next Modigliani. It had been so long. They must be due for a real find soon. She zoomed in closer. Why, it was a boy, maybe 12 years old, skin as white as paper where the dirt wasn't smudged, draped over Ray's shoulder like a cowboy's saddle. A street urchin from the crater bottom? Diane liked to consider herself unprejudiced. Van Gogh had been poor, hadn't he? And Mozart and Hemingway and Gauguin? Maybe this boy produced sidewalk paintings that transcended the form. But it wasn't until she saw him in her parlor, all white and blonde and freckled, next to Ray's crimson 6'9", that she realized just what Ray had found. "Oh," she said, "he's a natural."
Completely pure,
said Ray.
right down to the color of his hair, not a single mod.
Diane leaned in close and asked, "What's your name?"
Willie?
said the boy, his wide eyes, brown, flitting anxiously over the avant-garde decor. "He's too wonderful," said Diane. Ray's nano goatee rippled into a pleased fuchsia.
As natural as Huck Finn.
He exclaimed.
Do you know he got tired just walking the 10 miles up here from the South Rim? I had to carry him most of the way.
Diane clucked and put a hand to her cheek. "He's lovely," she said. "I must paint him."
Paint him?
said Ray.
Paint him? Anyone could paint a natural, dear. We have one. This calls for something grander, more daring.
"What then?"
We'll hold an exhibition right here. He's not a subject for art. He's a work of art himself. Retro, post-modern, in the flesh.
Diane looked at Willie, who dropped his eyes to the floor and fidgeted. "He's perfect," she breathed. Willie lifted his head, darted his eyes around the room, then edged backwards until he had hidden himself entirely behind Ray. A girl's voice laughed. Diane turned to see Madison, her daughter, tucked a bit too tightly in the embrace of a muscular boy with pale green skin. The boy turned to Madison and laughed.
I think he's afraid of your head.
Diane took an immediate dislike to him. So Madison's head was a little large. What did you expect with a state-of-the-art intelligence package? At least she'd been able to hold it upright since those neck muscle mods. Diane always tried to keep an open mind about Madison's boys, but she would make it difficult.
"You remember Sebastian?"
said Madison.
"Sebastian Schilt from the club?"
That explained his manners. A lower rim family barely out of the crater at all. "Charmed, my dear," said Diane. "But I thought the Schilts had only girls."
"He switched, for me. Isn't that sweet?"
"That's a bit drastic, don't you think, for so early in your relationship?"
Nonsense,
said Ray with a broad wink at Madison.
It's not like it's permanent.
"Are you going to adopt that boy?"
asked Madison. She beamed at her grass-colored companion.
"You didn't know my parents were such philanthropists, did you?"
What a silly notion.
Burst out Ray.
We're artists, dear. Why would we want to spoil a creature who's already such a delight?
"You're not going to help him? Look at him. His skin takes days to heal. He's probably crawling with germs. He'll start aging before long."
Don't worry,
said Ray.
We'll feed him properly and give him a room. He'll be a good deal better off than he'd be on the crater floor.
Who's this?
Asked a quiet voice. They all turned to see Willie, no longer hidden behind Ray, gazing with amazement on a reproduction of Renoir's Alphonsine hanging on the wall.
Is she a friend of yours?
Willie asked. Ray, Diane, and Sebastian laughed. Even Willie laughed. Poor dear, said Diane. How deliciously naive.
"I don't see what's so funny,"
said Madison. She stalked out. Sebastian swallowed his grin and ran after her. Ray sighed.
Kids,
he said.
You pinch and save to get the top-of-the-line prenatals, pump their brains full to bursting, and for what? They've got no appreciation of the finer things. Now, where were we?
About to plan your artistic coup d'etat, Diane reminded him.
Ah, yes.
And a coup d'etat it was. Panache lauded it as abusively unfeigned, ferociously retro-modern, while La Nouvelle Mode called it insolent yet acidic, an unrivaled tour de force of neoplasticism. The upper rim avant-garde descended en masse. It was Ray's idea, really, said Diane. Have another hors d'oeuvre?
Enough,
cried Vivienne Duchamp.
We've been here half an hour. We're dying to see it. No more suspense, please.
Only too happy, madam,
said Ray, his goatee kaleidoscoping. He motioned at the parlor wall, which dissolved to one-way transparency. In the dimly lit room on the other side lay Willie, asleep. The avant-gardist gasped.
The unblemished barbarian,
breathed Walter Delaney. Is he really sleeping? Asked Georgette Leguine. How marvelously quaint. As if on cue, Willie yawned, ran a hand through his blonde hair, threw back the sheet, under which he wore no clothes, and sat up.
Such unaffected simplicity,
exclaimed Vivienne. Willie scratched his buttocks. The personification of the vernacular, declared Georgette.
He's natural down to the marrow,
said Ray.
And not a prisoner. No, he's free to come and go as he pleases. He mostly stays here, but occasionally he goes back to the crater floor to visit his natural mother.
The emphasis was unmistakable. Their guests gasped again.
You don't mean
Ugh, a natural birth?
he was squeezed?
Diane wished Ray wouldn't always bring that up. It made her feel queasy whenever she saw Madison's head. But she had no real complaints. Willie was the new craze. Barely 2 weeks after the first review in Panache, chief editors Leroy Forbes and Charlene Fleming fairly begged to travel from the New York crater rim to Philadelphia expressly to see them, or to see Willie at any rate. Only half an hour from their anticipated arrival, Madison wandered into the parlor, wearing old plastic pants and smoking a cigar. Diane tried to shoo her away. "They'll be here any minute, darling. Can't you be somewhere else for a few hours? Where's that boyfriend of yours?"
Where do you think?
"Well, how should I know, dear? Is he at home?" Madison bit her nails like she always did when she was angry. "Madison, is something wrong?"
You wouldn't understand.
"Try me."
He's just at home, all right? Did you expect him to hang around here while you tortured that boy?
"Torture? Now really?"
I said you wouldn't understand.
"What curious friends you take up with. I always said that pale skin color was a bad choice. Is he a vegetarian? One of those save the cow types?"
He doesn't even like me anyway.
said Madison.
I don't know why you had to make me look like this.
Diane was truly perplexed. "What do you mean, dear? Are you talking about your head?"
Just forget it, okay?
said Madison, as usual taking offense when Diane was only trying to help. She whirled and headed for the door, only to crash into Ray on his way in.
What's the problem?
He demanded.
I don't want our guests to walk in on a scene.
Oh, Daddy.
Madison whimpered, suddenly the sweet little girl.
All I need is a few thousand for a mod, and I'll never ask you for anything again.
What?
said Ray.
I can't stand this stupid head. I look like a lollipop. I want it changed.
"But Madison," said Diane, "your neural connections, they're all set. You can't remove anything in your brain. You might forget how to walk, or speak, or even forget who I am."
No, I won't.
Madison pouted.
There's a mod artist on the North Rim who says he can move brain sections to other body parts with some connecting neural tissue. And I've always thought my breasts weren't exactly...
At that moment, Willie strode into the room, looking quite ridiculous with a glass of wine in one hand and a cigar in the other.
Our guests.
Remembered Ray.
Here.
He said, whipping out his wallet. He punched a few buttons on it to make funds available for Madison's use.
There's $5,000. No, here, take 10. Use whatever you need. Go do whatever you want.
Thanks, Daddy,
said Madison, sugary sweet, and bolted for the door.
And put that down.
Ray said to Willie, grabbing the wine and cigar.
You've become rather too free around here lately. You should remember your place.
"Oh, he's just imitating you, dear," said Diane. "I think it's cute." But she wondered about the change. Willie didn't behave quite so much like a little boy as when he had first arrived. He even seemed taller. Perhaps it was just that he had become more confident around them, more at ease than at first, so that he stood up straighter. Yes, that must be it. But then she noticed the side of his hand, and before she could stop herself, she screamed. On one side of each hand, still pink from pushing through the skin, sprouted the beginnings of new fingers. She pointed at them, too overcome to speak. Ray grabbed Willie's hand and rubbed at the nubs as if to make sure they were real. "Maybe they won't notice," Diane blurted, knowing it was stupid. How could they not notice?
How did you get these mods?
Ray asked him, slow and easy.
Did you think we'd just look the other way?
Willie didn't respond, but neither did he step back. Diane uncomfortably noticed again how much bigger he seemed than when he first arrived. "What are we going to do?" she asked, trying not to fall apart.
Get him to his room,
said Ray.
When they come, stall.
"Where are you going?"
To somehow fix this mess without cutting his hands off.
The editors arrived. Diane showed them her painting collection, inquired about New York weather, about their trip, about the conservatism of the nation's major museums. They answered politely, but Diane knew they must see how her hand shook, how she grasped at every new thread of conversation. She began to despair of Ray ever coming when he suddenly returned.
My deepest apologies. Place all of the blame on me. I'm afraid I begged my wife not to show you our Willie until I arrived.
Well, better late than never,
said Mr. Forbes. Ray gestured the wall to transparency with a flourish. Willie danced behind it, shirtless, pounding on a punching bag with two thoroughly gloved hands. Diane quelled a sudden desire to shriek with delight. A perfect ruse. She had never doubted Ray for a moment.
Authentic 20th century exercise equipment,
said Mr. Forbes, brightening. Miss Fleming nodded sagely.
Note the symbolist ideal of the angular displaying power over the spherical, quite reminiscent of the cubism of that era.
Willie lunged and dodged, showing no sign of tiring. Diane glanced sidelong at their guests. Did they notice how fast his fists moved?
Don't miss the sweat on his body.
Ray crooned.
Modern man doesn't remember what it was like to have such a primitive cooling system.
quite authentic.
Agreed Mr. Forbes.
Perspiration, clearly a weakness of the natural form, paradoxically symbolized strength in the 20th century's popular art.
Willie punched harder. Diane wondered what they would think of Willie's weakness if one of his blows tore the bag from the ceiling. But their guests' fascination was satisfied before any such disaster. They left quickly, still remarking on Willie and promising another special feature. When the door closed, Ray grinned like an adolescent in love.
I saved the day, didn't I?
He said.
They adored him. They had no clue he's had mods.
Diane felt only an exhausted relief, like a taut guitar string snapping loose. How'd you get him to play along? He's been so difficult lately. She threw herself into an antique Louis XVI chair.
I promised him some bicep mods,
said Ray. Diane tensed. A soft, "oh," escaped her mouth.
and I'll give him what I promised. Not like it matters. He's had intellect and muscle mods. Besides those fingers, he's nothing now.
But no one knows that. We can keep the gloves on him, give him baggy clothes.
Darling, we knew it wouldn't last forever.
Ray smiled down at her.
Old ideas always give way to the new.
That was Ray's problem, always overconfident. Diane slumped against the chair back. Georgette and Walter and Vivian, she said listlessly. They've been here 3 times a week, sometimes 4.
And they'll be back again,
said Ray. He collapsed into an ottoman across from her. Diane studied him, surprised. Ray was the type who hated conflict, always smoothing things over, never admitting a problem. She realized he must be more upset than he admitted to answer so brusquely. She started to say, "I'm sorry," but a shout from the doorway interrupted her.
I'm back!
Madison burst into the room, arms flung wide, her head now quite an average size. But her breasts,
It cost a little more than I expected,
she said.
but he accepted your credit.
Ray stood up.
How much?
He asked in a frightening monotone. Madison's smile faltered.
For the mod, you mean?
I mean to get it reversed.
Ray said, never raising his voice.
Give me the address.
You said I could use whatever I needed.
Madison protested. Diane sprang to her defense. Ray, you did tell her she could do what she wanted. Ray slowly turned to face her.
Look at her, Diane. She's a caricature and a male fantasy. A comic strip doxy. No mod swindler's going to prey on my daughter's insecurities and have a license the next day.
He turned back to Madison.
If he even has a license now.
Madison handed over a business card without a retort, but she glowered at him. Ray stamped to the door. Madison swallowed, glaring at Diane with bright eyes. I know, darling, I know, said Diane, anticipating the tirade. Willie's been stealing mods, and your father's awfully upset about it. He tries to be cheerful, but, well, I don't know what that foolish boy was thinking after all we've done for him. Madison flounced into the seat Ray had vacated. Diane tried not to stare at her transformed body.
Done for him.
Madison said.
Mom, he'll be glad to finally get out of here.
What are you talking about, dear? He was a 12-year-old playing in the slums before we took him in. What does he have to go back to?
He's not a little kid,
said Madison, casting her eyes toward the ceiling.
He's almost a man.
Diane seriously hoped that mod artist hadn't scrambled her daughter's neural pathways. He doesn't even come up to your shoulder, Madison.
Of course not. He's a natural. And how would you know his age? You never speak to him. You just gawk at everything he does. He always plays whatever role you set for him. You haven't spent the time to know what he really wants, what he dreams of.
A slow nausea sank into Diane's stomach. And you've spent a lot of time with him. Is that it?
What if I have?
Madison, where did Willie get those mods? Madison didn't even flinch.
I gave them to him, of course. He wouldn't steal, and you needn't feel betrayed. He was going to leave soon anyway. He's had enough of your abuse.
Diane was truly astonished. When had they ever mistreated the boy? I don't like you talking to me like this, she said, trying to sound stern. At that moment, Willie appeared at the door.
Come here, baby,
Madison cooed, patting the seat next to her.
We're talking about you.
Willie tripped into the room, as if surprised his legs had moved him forward, and sat down. Diane found herself looking up at him. Could he have grown larger since that afternoon?
We're leaving, Mom,
said Madison. Diane swallowed. She definitely didn't like the idea of them going out together. What if someone they knew should see them? Well, don't be out long. You and your father should talk this out when he gets back.
You don't understand,
said Willie with surprising aplomb. Diane jumped just to hear him speak at all. And when did he develop that deep voice?
I'm taking a mod to speed my body through puberty.
He explained, covering Madison's hand with his own.
And my mind is already advanced sufficiently to secure a job. I won't need to rely on your generosity anymore.
The conversation was quickly sliding out of Diane's control. She wished Ray hadn't left. He would have known what to do.
Willie's going back home, back into the crater tonight,
said Madison.
And I'm going with him.
Time stretched by in the empty house. Diane wandered from room to room, not sure what she was expecting to find. Madison's room still held all of her things, as if she'd be back any moment, angry if anything was out of place. Willie's room was as bare as the day he arrived, with the small addition of a punching bag hanging limply from the ceiling. She drifted back to the parlor and sat in her chair. She imagined Vivian, Walter, and Georgette as they had sat countless times over the past weeks, only now they sneered at her, traded knowing looks, shook their heads, and sighed.
A pity about your daughter,
said Vivian.
And marriage, too. I suppose they still do that sort of thing in the lower sections.
We can only stay a minute, Georgette added. The exhibition, you know. A shame you won't be bringing Willie. Walter smiled suddenly.
If you aren't showing anything, well, then I could use your booth, couldn't I? Wouldn't want to leave it empty.
Their conversation whirled around her, sometimes consoling, more often cruel. Sometimes she imagined they would never come again. Would all her evenings be spent like this now, painting or dreaming or remembering better days? Finally, she heard Ray's footsteps remounting the stairs. Just wait until he heard. She'd let him know what she thought of him running off like that, leaving her to deal with the household problems.
Diane,
he said, bursting in, face flushed. She ran to him, suddenly scared. What's wrong? You didn't kill him, did you?
No. He even tried to talk her out of it. Foolish girl. But she wouldn't be dissuaded. The man's a genius. A genius.
Who is?
Zane, the mod artist who altered Madison. You must meet him, darling. He's a man with a vision, a man with ideas, not just mimicry. I've already promised him a sponsorship.
Ray couldn't keep still. He paced the room, gesticulating. Ray, are you talking about the man who wrecked our daughter's body? Who drove her to... Wait until you hear what she's done.
What? What?
He waved distractedly.
Oh, girls will be girls, you know. I'm talking about a Michelangelo.
He grabbed her arms and shook her in his excitement.
I don't know why we ever bothered with Willie, but it prepares the way perfectly for Zane. The man is the exact opposite of Willie. No humanity at all.
He's not human?
That depends on your definition now, doesn't it? Today, his entire body was covered with human faces. Imagine it. Young, old, beautiful, gruesome, different noses, different chins, laughing or sneering or sulking or crying. And when he spoke, they all spoke together. But none with the same intonation or appearance. There was no way to tell which was really his face, or what his reaction was. A Kantian representation of man, never knowable, the heart unrevealed by the sensory externals.
Ray was so animated that Diane found herself caught up in the excitement. That's brilliant, dear. The reviewers will die for it.
The real beauty,
Ray went on,
is that that's only one work. Like a painting or a sculpture, he completely remods himself 2 or 3 times a month, whenever he's inspired by something new.
Something this original could not help escape notice, especially when linked to a skill with mods at the edge of the scope of technological possibility. Diane decided to wait, an hour anyway, before telling Ray about Madison. Surely this would get their names printed in La Nouvelle Mode again, and the parties they would have. Georgette will be so jealous, she cooed. Madison's disappearance affected their lives much less than Diane would have expected. She supposed, when she thought about it, that they had raised her as best they knew how. Now she could make her own choices, live where she wanted, even marry if she had a mind. They would miss her, perhaps, but Madison could take care of herself, and Diane had her art after all. A few days after Madison's departure, Georgette and Walter arrived promptly, in a buzz, having heard there would be a surprise. Zane was waiting in a back room, of course, having been smuggled in that morning with no little secrecy. Ray welcomed Georgette and Walter as usual, flattered them, offered them seats and hors d'oeuvres. They responded politely, and yet wasn't there a certain coldness about Walter's demeanor? And Georgette, she hadn't entered with the usual darling and kiss. Could they have found out about Madison and Willie already? Well, let them laugh, Diane thought. Teenagers go through these phases. She'd probably be back within the year. She wouldn't be used to working for a living. It would be harder than she'd think. A year. No, a month. A month at most. The doorbell chimed. Ray returned a minute later with, "Could that be Vivian? But what a transformation!" Her violet skin was dulled to a light peach, her double-jointed arms locked, her hair a sallow blonde, her fingers reduced to the original 10. Every part of her body was restored to its natural state. Diane watched the reaction as Vivian sauntered in, saw Walter and Georgette glare, and then gush with appreciation.
I did it right.
Said Vivian, turning for their approval.
Held nothing back. I think it'll be all the rage this year.
Diane remembered Zane crouched in the back room like a trap ready to spring, and she couldn't help it. A giggle burbled out of her throat and burst out in a laugh. How astonished they'd be when the masterpiece was revealed. They had turned their backs on Vivian's sad attempt at art seconds after seeing the real thing. But it was of no consequence. She had known from the beginning they were pretenders only, not connoisseurs in the true sense, like she and Ray. Who were they to criticize her family or her art? They would still be lifting their noses in Philadelphia while she and Ray were touring the world. She pitied them all. She really did. Then she realized they were all looking at her, wondering why she had laughed. "Oh, the natural look," said Diane, stifling a half yawn. "How passé."
Author's note.
This story was, of all things, inspired by a short story by Langston Hughes, in which a white couple showed what they thought was kind attention to a black child while treating him as almost a subspecies. For Hughes, it was all about race. But it doesn't take a different skin color for people to find ways to differentiate themselves from others. All the rage this year is about a couple who define themselves through their art and never manage to see outside of the box they've painted themselves in.
All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the story. Guess what? Rish certainly did.
Oh, you changed it up.
Yeah, how about that?
You never know what we're going to do on the Dunesteef audio fiction magazine. Okay, it went on. Thank you, David, for sending us that story. You know, last week when I went on and on and on about how the author had sent us the story months and months ago, and we weren't able to get to it in time, and it was a record holder, and I gave him 1,000 apologies. Well, David, turns out you sent us our story during the latter half of the Kennedy administration, and we're just barely getting to it now. And I didn't realize that. I don't know how to apologize enough, except to say that if I ever have a child, he will be called David Walton Outfield. I hope that makes up for it a little bit.
That's right. We have a new record holder for the longest wait. Sorry about that. But I hope you feel that we did justice to your tale in the end.
Back when we first started the podcast, we didn't have any female readers, really. Sometimes you'd get your wife to contribute. Sometimes we would ask coworkers. But we tried to farm out a couple stories to professional podcasters. And guess what? We never heard back. And that's how these two stories happened to have slipped through our fingers.
Yeah, but that's all right. It was enjoyable.
The person who swooped in and saved the story after a long time of waiting for someone else to do it was...
This story was read by Eleiece Krawiec. I hope I said that right. Who did a really fine job. I first heard Eleiece read stories over on Well Told Tales, which is a podcast that also does fiction stories like we do here.
So thank you, Eleiece.
Yes, you did a fine job, and you will be hearing from Eleiece again. She will be back for another story in the future.
Cool. It's been really great when people have volunteered, and Big and I don't make any money from this, and so we haven't been paying any of the people who've contributed voices or editing or music or art. Basically, all the money that we have been given goes to the writers, and that's cool. Although sometimes when somebody does a really, really bang-up job, I nearly said kick-ass on the air. Oh, thank goodness. We almost earned that explicit warning.
Yikes.
When somebody does a great job, I wish that we could pay them.
Maybe the day will come.
So if you love good fiction and want to see it continue, please donate. Press the button.
So earlier on in the year, we talked a fair amount about Dollhouse, and then we kind of stopped.
Right. Well, of course, we talked about it when we went to the Comic-Con panel.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about it right before it hit. I believe that I promised to never sing the Greatest American Hero theme if people would watch Dollhouse.
Oh, yeah.
I'm fairly sure that I could, believe it or not, I'm walking on air right now and not be breaking any deal because nobody watched it. And then we also talked about it after the first episode had aired and both of us had seen that. But I don't think we said a bloody thing about it after that.
I guess now's our chance. The show is over.
Yes, we've both seen the season finale. It wasn't the last episode shot, but it's the last episode Fox will show.
Explain that to me.
Joss was contracted to do 13 episodes. They did the first pilot.
Uh-huh.
Fox shelved that pilot. He tried to find a way to reuse it. First, he was going to air it second, because he had shot a new pilot. Apparently, it didn't work out. It's on the DVD, so once we see that, we'll know better what we're talking about. He used bits and pieces of that pilot throughout for like memories or something like that.
Oh.
But Fox decided not to show it, and he was still obligated for 13 episodes.
Oh, so he had to shoot another one.
After
That one doesn't
done,
count then.
Well, from what I've heard, it was never intended to shoot another one beyond the finale. And when it came time to do the DVD or just to look back at the season, there were only 12 episodes that had aired. So either he felt pressured to do one more episode, so they shot a really super cheap episode to round out the DVD, or they shot this super cheap episode to show Fox,
hey, we can still do the show in a second season. Here's where that might go as maybe a breadcrumb. Please don't cancel us. Bring us back again. I don't know. The DVD comes out in the summer. If you missed it, as most people without a TiVo did, I did hear that a lot of people T-voted.
I heard that too.
People in that prime demographic, rich young people is what they want. While we've talked about that the network isn't necessarily going to care about T-vote audiences because they don't watch the commercials.
Yeah, they said that the web viewing was high as well, which is where I viewed it, and you said that didn't matter.
It doesn't matter as far as dollar signs to advertisers go, but
that's probably true, because
it matters.
After a while they had no at first when I was watching it, they would put on like advertisements for The Simpsons and stuff in between where the commercials were supposed to go. Then after like 5 episodes or so, they just stopped even bothering with those, and they put no advertisements on it at all.
I don't know. I imagine that a show that is TiVo'd that much, and a show with a very loyal audience, as anything Joss Whedon does, will sell a lot of DVDs. So
yeah, that's probably true.
See.
Warning, the following episode contains spoilers. Listener discretion is advised.
Why don't we do a post-mortem on Dollhouse? You know, we got an email a couple weeks, months ago where somebody says, hey, I noticed you guys aren't talking about Dollhouse anymore. And I didn't really know how to respond to that. I didn't hate the show, but you know what? I never loved it the way that I loved. I mean, even Angel, which I rarely loved, was a show I enjoyed more.
I thought that Dollhouse started slower than any show that Joss has done that I've seen, except for maybe Buffy, I think had a slower first season. And maybe that's not the case. I mean, I know that a lot of people like you absolutely love Buffy, and even the very first episodes you hold up on a pedestal.
Not me, no. I mean, I love Buffy, but not the first season.
But yeah, I don't know. The first season of Buffy, I think, perhaps was slower to draw me in than Dollhouse was. But Dollhouse started out really slow. I really didn't think the first episode was great. It was all right. I mean, it wasn't even the kind of show that I would watch. If it weren't for the fact that Joss Whedon was behind it, I probably would have said, oh, it's this kind of a show, and I would have been gone. It's just like the A-Team, except for with a different premise behind it. Second, third, fourth show, I think, were also fairly weak, and it wasn't until some interesting stuff finally started happening further down the line that I started going, oh, you know, this show may turn out all right. It's too bad. I'm sure it's too late because nobody watches it anymore. I mean, the ratings, not that they were high to begin with, but they were already falling.
Yeah, to me, that's kind of astounding that rather than the word of mouth spreading or people getting caught up in the show or, you know, people saying, hey, did you watch Dollhouse? Well, you better watch it next week. The ratings actually dropped there at the end of the series. I believe, and I could be wrong, but I'm fairly sure I'm right, the season finale was the lowest rated of all 12.
Huh. It steadily got better. But yeah, I guess people were disappearing by then, so it was too late. But yeah, it steadily got better and better, and it got to the point where each week there was at least something in the show. If we'd go, you know, that's the kind of stuff that I've grown to expect from Joss Whedon.
So you watched every episode?
I have, yeah. I've seen them all now.
I did too, and just like all of Joss's shows, it rewarded you if you've watched all the episodes. It would make reference to others. And, you know, he was so great to do that on Buffy and Angel. Like the last season of Angel, he would make reference to something that had happened in the second season of Buffy. And it's just like, wow, that was 8 years ago.
Yeah, I really like that. It used to be long ago when I was growing up, and maybe that was just a sitcom thing, but it was like at the end of every episode, they pushed the reset button, and aside from the actors being a week older, there was nothing different. You know, you come back and they almost never ever mention something that happened before. But it seems like in recent years that's totally changed, and most shows do that now. They'll progress you through things.
I think that people have discovered that that's the power of television, the serialized nature of, you know, you have 22 hours to tell a story rather than just we have 48 minutes. Yeah. You have several episodes to tell a story over. So maybe you have your main story that gets resolved at the end, but why not have a B or a C story that continues week after week and rewards the people who watch it every week?
Right. I think Joss Whedon is one of those that does a really good job of rewarding those folks that stick around. And it's really paid off. He's managed to do well with Fox and have lots of long-standing series.
One long-standing series. Everything else has been canceled.
Hasn't paid off at all. Sorry. I don't know what I was thinking.
This conversation has derailed.
If you had to name an episode that was your favorite, what would it have been?
I think it was the one that was called Man on the Street, which is the one that had Patton Oswalt in it, which...
Nice.
It was interesting watching that one because you know how big of a Pixar fan I am. So every time I'd hear him say any line, all I could see in my head was Remy, the rat from Ratatouille. I don't know that I know Patton Oswalt from anything else, to tell you the truth. What else has he done?
Shoot, I did a show with him. I think it was King of Queens.
Yeah, so I enjoyed that. That was when Joss first pulled a rabbit out of his hat and said, "Hey, look at this." Something was going on, and I expected Joss to do the thing he's so famous for, which is get you to really like a character and then mercilessly kill them to let you know, hey, I'll kill people if I want to, so you better be worried about these characters. That's what I thought was coming, and instead something else came. And
what you are referring to is there are three vases. What is it?
3 flowers in a vase. Like that.
That's the one that you were talking about. Were there any episodes that you hated?
I've said that the first episode didn't do anything for me.
Mm-hmm.
Also, probably the one where she's a blind person, although there was even parts in it. So I can't say that I hated any of the episodes, but there were some that I would put on my list of least favorites. What about you? Cool. Were there any that you hated? Or
the third episode, Stage Fright, the backup singer episode, was the one where I started to like the show, mostly because it looked like such an uninteresting premise. Oh no, there's going to be singing? But I really enjoyed that the singer was the one that wanted to die, and then when Echo beat her over the back with the chair, I was like, wow, I could not have predicted that. And then there's this moment at the very, very end where she and Sierra share a look, and I was like, oh, what does this mean? And yeah, finding myself making those noises, I'm like, wait, I'm enjoying this show.
Were there any that you hated?
No, there weren't, and that's cool. There's not a single Firefly that I hate. There were 2 episodes of Buffy of the 125 or however many there were that I hated. But yeah, I don't think there was a single Dollhouse I hated. There were a couple of times when it would be over and I'd be like, well, I hope that nobody saw that as their first episode and decides never to continue watching. But I had a whole lot invested in this show because unlike all of the other Joss Whedon shows, I was around for its conception. I was around before the first episode aired. And
you could actually be the person that helped lift it up in some way instead of coming in after it's already been canceled and just seeing the DVDs and going...
That's true. There have been shows that have become hits, and I had watched them before they were ever hits. And so I'm able to look down my nose at people and say, I watched Cheers back when Coach was on it, and you didn't even want to watch anything on NBC. I don't really know what to talk about with the show. I said that this was going to be our post-mortem. It's like, hey, let's get together and we'll do a post-mortem on Dollhouse, and we'll talk about what went right and what went wrong.
Uh-huh.
The reveal in the second to last episode of Alpha was probably the high point of the whole series to me.
Uh-huh.
It was masterfully done because of the actor that they chose to play him. In 100 years, they say, pick an actor to be Alpha. I never would have picked him. And just the way that they set everything up, so you lowered your guard completely and then slash, Alpha is in the room. Dude, that was cool. And I hope that people caught that episode. And it was a right before the commercial moment. So if you were actually watching the show, you'd just be like, oh my gosh, you get to talk about it for a minute and a half. There's sometimes an advantage to having commercials. My friend was showing me his favorite show, his Firefly, and it's this show called Nowhere Man, and it was a UPN show that only went 1 season, and it had like a ton of diehard fans that just were begging UPN to bring it back and at least put it out on DVD and that, and of course they wouldn't until somebody somewhere said, we may actually make a few dollars if we do, sir, and he's like, rush it out there, hurry. And so he showed me the pilot the other night when I was at his house, and they would have this moment, and then it would go to commercial, and I would look to start to talk to him about the show, but since it was the DVD, immediately would come back up. And so there is, in my mind, an advantage to commercials. I think your kids' generation may just lose the idea of what the commercial break is. There's so many times when you'll watch a show and you'll watch it on DVD and they'll say something and then go to the commercial and then they come back and they say it again. And you're just like, what? They just said it again.
That's the
but
good
it's
old
because
days.
of that. They didn't realize that somebody would be watching this without commercials someday.
You're rambling again, guys.
What's that announcer mean?
Rambling!
Oh, I guess so.
Okay. So back to Dollhouse. Just that moment of the reveal of Alpha was one of those where you just got, oh my gosh, honey, did you believe that could have happened? And she's like, I don't exist. Your experience may vary.
My experience was, oh, honey, can you believe that? And she was like, oh, sorry, what?
To me, that was the high point of the show right there. Again, your results may vary. But those last 3 shows, the one where she was the dead woman, I just was like, wow. I mean, she has the personality of a woman who has died put into her so that she can solve her own murder.
Yeah, it's a possibility that I would have never come up with myself.
And so, yeah, she goes around and chums up with these people that were close to the woman, trying to figure out, okay, which one killed me? And it opened up, in my mind, a bunch of possibilities where the show could go. And I thought, well, okay, what if there is a terrorist and he's captured and there's a bomb placed somewhere and they're like, he won't talk. He's a Muslim. So what can we do? And it's like, well, let's upload his brain and we'll stick it in Echo and we'll have Topher do a couple of clicks on the keyboard so that
she knows what she knows, but is nice.
So that, yeah, or okay, that there is a serial killer out there and nobody knows who it is. And they're like, okay, this is what we know. And we type all this data into the computer and make an amalgam of everything that we have, the police have found so far. And we put it on a disc and we zop it right into Sierra and let her loose and follow her and find out where she goes and what she does, because she feels what the killer feels, etc. Anyway, maybe these are stupid ideas.
Could they scan one of the victims of the serial killer's brain after they're dead, or is that too late?
I don't believe that that's possible from what they have set up on the show. Otherwise, the lady from Haunted could have just known who had killed her. She had the memory of her death. But it's possible that they could upgrade the system and do stuff like that. And it's like, holy cow, we've got JFK's brain scan and we're going to be able to put it in golf. And he comes in and suddenly he's JFK and he tells us,
Nixon had me killed.
That's something that he might say. Enjoy some good chowder, Echo. And that may be totally stupid, but it opened up possibilities for things that I hadn't considered.
That wasn't stupid at all.
What, really?
No.
So all of the actives were all named with
the phonetic alphabet. Yeah,
is that what they call alphabet. It? The military one. They all. It's like November is what they say for N.
Yeah,
and Victor.
In fact, after one episode, I think we went to Wikipedia and we looked and we're like, let's find out what they all are. And there are a couple, golf being the biggest example, that are just absurd names for a character. And
Tango.
When Dominic in Victor's head said whiskey and everybody assumed that he was asking for a drink, I realized, because it was so recently that we had discovered that W is whiskey, and then I knew that Saunders was a doll. That was one of those where I'm like, oh my gosh, he wasn't asking for whiskey. That's her name.
Didn't get that at all.
Do you remember him asking for whiskey?
I do remember him saying whiskey, and
okay.
I guess I ought to watch it again just so that I could see that part. And I loved that part, by the way, when Victor was Dominic and him acting like Dominic. It was so great to see him just doing the facial expressions and saying stuff the way that Dominic talked. It was really fun.
That's something that's kind of fun about the show, is if you're watching from the very beginning, they introduce the Russian kid. And I think it's like the second or third episode that you realize he's not a Russian kid. He is Victor. He is one of the dolls. And a couple episodes later, another character that you thought you knew is revealed. And then a few more episodes down the line, you discover another one is inactive. And that to me is just so cool. It's like, to a certain extent, Battlestar Galactica, where in the very first, the miniseries, they reveal that Cylons now look like people. And
Soylent Green is people.
Soylent Brown is not people. I won't tell you what it is. Just assume that it's people. All right, you're better off.
Okay.
And they say, okay, Cylons look like us, and there's probably Cylons in the fleet. Or you get one revealed right there at the end of the miniseries. I don't think you get another one revealed for a long ass time, and then when you get like 4 in one episode. And yeah, to me that kind of thing is fun if you had a body snatcher show, or if you had some kind of alien parasite in people thing, or spy show, and you find out from episode to episode that somebody that you thought was good is actually bad. That kind of thing is neat.
Yeah, it's a good plot technique.
A problem that I had with the Sarah Connor Chronicles in season 2 was there was a character that obviously was not a time traveler, and a few episodes down the line, suddenly that character is revealed to be a time traveler. It's funny, I try to go with shows. I don't like to call bullshit. When people do that, it usually bothers me because I'm a writer. I know what it's like to have somebody say, Donald wouldn't say that. And it's like, I created Donald.
I know what Donald would say. I am God.
But yeah, I had to call it on that moment because it's like, no, this person is not from the future.
Warning, today's comments from Rish Outfield are especially stupid. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you, announcer man. You're always there to get my back. All right, OT, what was your favorite episode?
Okay.
Because nobody watched the show, there wasn't a lot of controversy, but a lot of people called the show Whorehouse and said that, that it was all exploitation of women kind of thing. And, for Joss Whedon, this avowed feminist, to do a show like that. I don't want to get off on a rant, but feminism does not mean that women are awesome and perfect and better than men in every way. Feminism means that women are like men. They can be great, they can be awful, they can be smart, they can be dumb, they can be strong, they can be weak. They are people. And I don't know where the idea of feminism devolved into the idea that men are bad and women are good. And Joss has shown throughout his several series that women can make as big a mistakes as men can. Women can be awesome heroes. Women can be terrible supervillains. I mean, I think it's great that he did. It's not just saying a woman can be a doctor. It's like a woman can destroy the world. A woman can
save the world. And an interesting thing with that, too, is, all the dolls aren't just women. We have characters that are dolls that are males that we see throughout the show.
Well, Fox played up the sexual angle a lot. If you watch the promos, you would think that it's a sex show. I think they did the same with Dark Angel when that was on there. It's like, hey, folks, this is the hottest girl you'll ever see, and she's going to be in her underwear. Tune in this Friday during the death slot. I'm sure James Cameron would have said, hey, Dark Angel is not just about cleavage, folks. Hey, there's something else going on. Same with Dollhouse. Joss had said that he wanted there to be an old active and wanted there to be a fat active and all that, because it's not all just 20-year-old supermodels that are going to be needed. There's somebody that's going to be needed for a dad. There's somebody that's going to be needed for a senator. There's somebody that's going to be needed for, I never got to meet my grandfather, and this all is going to pretend to be him. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think people who didn't watch the show got the impression that
she becomes your ultimate sexual fantasy every Friday at 10 p.m.,
Yeah, the other thing that could be controversial as well is just the idea of the dollhouse as these people sign up to be slaves. They are programmed to do whatever you want them to do. And obviously slavery is going to be a really touchy issue. Also, we know that the dollhouse isn't necessarily a good place. And yet they tried to go out of their way as well to make these characters like Adele and like Topher and Boyd and the guy from Journeyman that I didn't ever like because he played the same character as Journeyman character, which was the jerky brother.
Lawrence Dominic.
Right, yeah, Dominic. They go out of their way to make these people seem human, even though they're doing a fairly evil thing and taking these people's lives from them. And in the future, perhaps, we may find out what these people are paying for by signing up to be dolls. There was an episode where we kind of get an idea as to what got Caroline into the dollhouse in the first place. It seems like it might be related to the damage that she did where she broke into that laboratory and released rats or whatever she was doing.
Rage-infected monkeys.
Oh, monkeys. But I don't know if that's really what got her in there or if it was something else. I don't know. I just wonder what the deal is.
Well, there are definitely more stories to be told. In that episode, at the end, remember they recruit the black kid to be a new active.
Right.
And we never saw him again, but I was just like, that's interesting. I'd like to see how his personality changes the next time we see him. I keep talking about how much potential that the show had, but I still don't feel like it had the limitless potential that Firefly did. I don't think that it had the potential that Angel did. I mean, Angel had 5 seasons, but there were still way more stories to tell. There's some shows where just by their very nature, it opens up a certain amount of storytelling. And then there are other shows, for example, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, as I mentioned, I think it has an even narrower possibility for stories than Dollhouse did. As of today, but Sarah Connor has been canceled, so we can talk about that.
Told all its stories then, I guess.
That's too bad, because it ended with a really, really interesting cliffhanger, and it looked like a very expensive show.
Yeah, that's
a Terminator
true.
did, and Dollhouse didn't look as expensive.
Yeah, it seemed like to me that maybe Joss learned his lesson with Firefly. You know, I think a lot of the reason why that got canceled probably had to do with the fact that it was expensive. They had to do the shots of the ship in space, and I don't think there was anything like that in Dollhouse.
Well, we talked about Firefly on many episodes, but something I don't think we've ever said, except for to each other, is the threat of cancellation loomed over Firefly from the very beginning. When Joss shot his pilot and gave it to Fox, and they said, we don't want it. Right then, he was like, oh no. And you can see that on Firefly, that every single episode was, what if this is the last one we get to make? So there are no filler episodes. There are no mediocre Firefly episodes.
Yeah, they put their all into each one, and it shows.
And it just, it's unlike any show I've ever seen where it feels like they put their best episodes right up front instead of waiting until the second season. And I think that they felt like with Firefly, we might not get a chance to do the origin or to get to do.
It's like Out of Gas, where they're already doing that flashback to when they first met episode, and you're just thinking, wow, this probably would have been better in season 2, but I guess it's a good thing they didn't wait till season 2 because there wasn't one.
Thank goodness they didn't. That's my favorite episode. That just the way that sucker ends with, hey, boy, have you been hearing a word I said? And he's just looking at the ship. Oh. Is there anything else you have to say about Dollhouse now that it's over?
Yeah, I mean, Dollhouse was fun while it lasted. I suppose it's been canceled, right? You said Terminator was canceled, so there's no way that it's still around.
Well, here's the weird thing. Dollhouse was not canceled. On May 18th, at their press conference, Fox revealed that Dollhouse is coming back for a second season of 13 episodes in the fall. It's still going to be on Fridays, this death slot. A bunch of shows have been canceled. But amazingly, Dollhouse was not one of them. In fact, I sent you the article, right? Do you remember what it said?
Yeah, something like the lowest rated renewal ever.
That's amazing. That would mean that it had lower ratings than the 3rd season of Veronica Mars.
Well,
that just astounds me.
Could be just of the year.
It did not get good ratings, but they brought it back. And we're recording this episode
the day that they renewed it.
Yeah. But there's been a lot of talk as why did Fox renew the show? Why did they not renew Prison Break or Sarah Connor or something else? What you said, price may be part of it.
Yeah, could be possible.
Joss did shoot that super cheap 13th episode that's going to be on the DVD. Who knows? Now that they've been renewed, I'm sure he shot that episode knowing that they probably even told him, yeah, you can shoot another episode. We're never going to air it. But then this crazy, wacky miracle happened, but he shot it cheap to show, hey, we can go even cheaper than this.
To tell you the truth, I think Firefly has a lot to do with it. That they sold a crap load of DVDs and they still keep selling those things. They're making a lot of money off of that show in other ways. And like you were saying before too, that it has really high TiVo ratings, whatever that is, and online viewer ratings. It scores way higher in those categories than most other shows do. Oh, iTunes, too. It's like one of the top shows each week as well. It's like in the top 10 or something like that for people buying shows off of iTunes. So perhaps they've finally seen there are other ways to make money off of a TV show than just putting it on the air and selling commercials. So I think that might possibly be why we get another chance at this show. I doubt we'll get season 2.5. Yes, I hate that too. I doubt we'll get it if the ratings are still that bad after the next season, but, at least they gave it a chance.
Here's the thing. You and I both know Fox fairly intimately.
they're probably not going to rerun this show to the potential that it has. If they pull a Jericho on this show, whereas Jericho was canceled, the fans clamored to bring the sucker back, and they didn't rerun a single episode from when it was canceled in April of 2007 to when it premiered the second season in January 2008. They never showed it again, and the ratings were terrible when the second season started. It's like, of course they were terrible. You didn't take advantage of like the summer to create new fans. You didn't show it on your affiliate network or do a marathon or hype it up or give the show a chance to grow and to do anything except for the word of mouth of people who had already seen this show that died, but someday it's going to be back. If Fox wanted this show to succeed, and again, why would you renew it if you don't want it to succeed? So they should rerun the sucker all through the summer.
Do they do reruns anymore?
A lot of times now we have reality shows, or we have really, really bad shows that they can show first run during the summer and say, hey, this is brand new, so keep watching TV. It used to be that the summer was just a write-off period. But at the same time, you could find out about this show that you had missed the first time around, or you could go back and catch the episodes that you hadn't been able to see, or, you go and hang out with your relatives and there's a show that they watch, and because it's on, it creates new fans. When I was a kid, there's a show on, late at night, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. I couldn't watch it while the school year was going, but if it was on during the summer, suddenly I could, wow, oh my gosh, I like this show. And anyhow, I just would hope that Fox would spend this time where they've already made the episodes, they've already paid for them or whatever, show them again on FX. Do a Dollhouse marathon, show all 13 episodes. Make a big, huge deal. We're going to show the never-before-seen pilot of Dollhouse on FX or on Fox even. I don't know why people don't do that anymore, except for reality shows make more money for them. The Dancing with the Stars, or So You Think You Can Dance, or Dance Fever with Danny Terrio, that they show that cost nothing but make millions and millions of dollars every single week. I hate that kind of stuff, but I can't blame the networks for showing it because money is good.
Hopefully they'll show those episodes again and give people a chance to get to know it that didn't know it already.
A show that I've been a huge fan of from the very beginning is Lost. And I had heard about this show before it aired, and that there was a monster or there was something on the island. And I was like, really? Well, I'm going to watch this. But I had to work the day that it premiered. This was when I was in LA, and I didn't have a TiVo or anything like that. And a couple of my friends did see it, and they're like, oh, did you see Lost? I was like, no, I didn't. And he's like, oh, the monster's a polar bear. And I was like, oh, wait, really? And I was bummed. And the next week, they showed the next episode of Lost. But then the next week, the third week, they said, tune in for a special night, and we're going to marathon 3 episodes of Lost. The pilot, the second episode, and then the world premiere of the third episode. And that I watched. And so I felt like I could be in on the ground floor again. And I saw all 3 in a row. And suddenly, I've seen every episode of Lost since then, even the crappy ones, the second season. Thank goodness that they did that marathon thing. And, for a first-run network show, ABC, to do that, it was clear they wanted people to get hooked on this show.
Yeah.
They got another diehard fan out of it.
Yeah, that's
for
cool.
doing that.
They did that with Heroes, too, if I remember right, back when it was first starting out.
Heroes, they would show on the Sci-Fi Channel that same week.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Do you remember that? And that's what I meant by an affiliate station.
And they did a marathon where they went back and showed like the first several episodes that if you missed them, here you go. You don't want to miss this. Who knows? Hopefully things work out.
There are shows that got much, much better after the first season. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is the best example I can think of right now. And I think it would be so cool if this show somehow became a hit. And when it premieres again in September, they're like, wow, our faith in the target audience, our faith in Joss Whedon, our faith in the Death Slot has paid off.
Okay, so that was our episode today. We again wanted to thank David Walton for his story. It was a very fine story. Really enjoyed it. And Kevin Anderson, I hope we've inspired you to go back and watch the shows that you didn't see.
We thank the people who helped us read and the people who listened all the way through the episode. I appreciate it. I really do.
So, I'm Big Anklevich.
And I'm Rish Outfield. when they come at you.
Oh, wait. You know what? There's this Jonathan Colton song that's about, like, people upgrading themselves and becoming, like, half robot and all that kind of crap. And I think it's really funny. And it just goes so perfectly with the story. So we're going to finish off the podcast with the Jonathan Colton song, Better.
But I had a quote all prepared. It was a Godfather quote.
Uh-huh.
Where did we go? When was the moment that we broke into? I think I know. In fact, I am sure I can blame it on you. I remember the first big surprise, the day you came home with your infrared eyes. I looked inside them, but all I could see were tiny reflections of me. But it's not me, it's you. What you're turning into is some kind of something that I never knew. You used to be okay, and I like you that way. But I don't think that I like you better. No, I don't think that I like you better. Started out small, some gills and some wings and a few extra thumbs. Now you're 13 feet tall. Even when you're asleep, your machinery hums. And I'm tired of the evenings I spend making small talk with your new robot friends and their stupid insistence on scanning my iris. They know damn well who I am. And you look like a victim of a surgical crime, a little Darth Vader, a little Optimus Prime. You used to be okay, and I liked you that way. But I don't think that I like you better. No, I don't think that I like you better. That's how it goes. Snap your mandibles once to say you understand. Now hold me close. Wait, now that's too close. You're crushing my hand. I can tell by that shrieking alarm that your weapon systems are active and armed. Do me a favor and power them down, just so we don't have a scene. And I wish it was different, but we're just not the same. At least we got someone we know we can blame. You used to be okay, and I liked you that way. But I don't think that I like you better. No, I don't think that I like you
Thanks for listening to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine. The Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine is published under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license, so please share our show with everyone you know, but don't alter the files or try to sell them. Take two.
It was a very interesting story. It was really fun in a snarky, these people are, I don't know how to say that. I don't know what I'm saying. It was a touching, tear-jerking teenage drama.
Speaking of jerking, I've been